Welcome, brave adventurers, to a dungeon guide that will propel you through the dawn of the infinite Galakrond's Fall dungeon. This is your go-to walkthrough for mastering one of the fastest and most manageable dungeons of this patch, in my opinion, in both fortified and tyrannical weeks. Starting off the dungeon's first round of trash, which some groups choose to skip, watch out for the infinite Chrono Weaver and make sure to interrupt them as they start casting Chrono Meld. This ability not only inflicts damage, but also cripples you by reducing haste and movement speed by 50%. The Infinite Time Slicer casts an uninterruptible tempo slice, so use some CC to stop it. Epoch Rippers teleport to a random target, so be speedy and dodge their Time Rip attack. Getting hit by it can be really bad news. Onwards to the first boss. As the battle starts, be smart with Sandstomp placements. Position these on the edges of the room to optimize Withering Sandpool management. Remember, avoid lingering in the Withering Sandpool as they inflict damage, reduce movement by 15%, and more importantly, haste by 25%. It's the anti-Bloodlust. When Chronikar hits 100 energy, he drops the Aeon Shatter on 2 random party members. Stay close to your team to dodge the ground circle and the Aeon fragments heading your way. Quickly shuffle to soak up the Aeon residue, preventing it from turning into the nasty residue blast that threatens the entire party. Usually, tanks handle this, but anyone in the party can step up and should be prepared to do it as well. Place it close to the melee to reduce the travel distance for anyone who might try to soak it. Before each Chrono Shear, tanks should employ their active mitigation to reduce the incoming damage. It deals physical damage, gives the tank a healing absorb, but also pushes them backwards, so mind your positioning. Once the tank's patched up, healers can dispel the sheared lifespan effect on the tank, which cranks up their damage taken by 200%. Keep an eye out and keep the team alive. As we go through the portal towards the next set of trash, we encounter Coalesced Time, which releases Chrono Burst, afflicting 2 random targets with a debuff, which will deal AoE damage upon expiration or when dispelled. Make sure to position these out of melee and try not to clip any intervals within the radius, as it will activate them and make them attack your group. Intervals also go boom with a move called Temporal Detonation, dealing arcane damage around them and destroying themselves. Another important attack from this mob is Infinite Bolt Volley. You should not let this go through in any situation, as it deals large party-wide damage. The Time Stream Anomaly casts Bloom, a debuff which spreads when it deals damage. Healers prioritize dispelling this debuff promptly to mitigate its effects on your party, and unless you have a cardboard tank, prioritize dispelling yourself or the DPS. Interrupt the Coalesced Moment's infinite bolts as much as possible and dispel the Tainted Sands debuffs. As for the leeches, they will cast Enervate, which should be interrupted as well. If the cast goes through, they will start channeling on a party member, dealing damage to them and everyone nearby, while also becoming immune to interrupts. CC this if you ran out of interrupts. As the last portal trash pack dies, the Manifested Timeways boss begins to spawn. This boss presents a unique challenge in which the room is divided into 4 quadrants upon pulling it, 2 lighter and 2 darker areas. The Accelerating Time or Light area inflicts arcane damage every second, but boosts movement speed by 30%, earning its nickname as the Fast Zone. On the flip side, the Decaying Time or Dark area also deals arcane damage but every 3 seconds instead of 1, and reduces player damage taken by 20%. Throughout the encounter, players must strategically alternate between these zones based on the mechanics in play. It's important to note that these areas continuously move clockwise, adding an additional layer of awareness. Tanks should maintain priority to the boss despite her extensive melee range, as she casts Radiant, causing increasing arcane damage to the party with each cast. The boss unleashes Fragments of Time, a stream of projectiles shot outwards. Players can use the fast and slow zones to navigate and dodge these projectiles effectively. My preferred tactic is to be near the starting point in melee, wait for the first few, and then step in between the boss and the orbs, keeping myself in the safe area. I also prefer moving right with them to stay ahead. Failure to dodge them results in substantial instant damage and a stacking dot effect, which will probably kill you. Don't go blaming the healer for this one. Another critical ability is Chrono Faded, a debuff on 2 random players dealing ticking arcane damage. While in the fast zone, this will tick faster, so you should pop a defensive if it is on you. Dispelling or letting the debuff expire releases Chrono Fade, causing damage and creating a dangerous ripple of bronze magic. To mitigate the risk, it's crucial to dispel or let it expire in the light or fast area, ensuring the party only takes a single tick of damage. Handling this debuff in the dark area or letting the affected player die there results in an extremely slow ripple, posing a significant threat to anyone crossing it. You can teleport or leap, blink, and other such abilities to deal with it, but it's best if you just get rid of it in the light area. While advanced tactics involving pixel stacking and mass dispelling exist, they might be overly complex to use in a pug. Once the manifested Timeways boss is defeated, you use the portals to travel further into the dungeon. As you reach the platform, your team might want to skip to the next mob, especially in timed content when dealing with one at a time isn't ideal. There's a good chunk of trash percentage available for this dungeon, so you really don't need this dragon. The way to skip it is by either using a Warlock Gateway placed right here, a Rogue Distract before it lands and then Shroud, or the most common and simple way. As you land, don't move forward, as the dragon hasn't been activated yet. Mount up and gather on the right side. Make a 3-second timer, and as it hits 0, everyone moves forward to dodge dragon before it touches down. If you happen to pull the dragon, however, make sure to dodge the Timeless Curse ground animation, as it will deal damage and stun you, and pop a defensive cooldown when he casts Infinite Fury. This deals group-wide arcane damage for 5 seconds. Moving into the next area, you'll come across Risen Dragons and Blight Chunks. If your trash percentage is a bit too high, you can consider skipping the pack on the right, but typically these are just pulled together. The Blight Chunks themselves aren't too threatening, but when they die, they buff the Risen Dragon with Relentless Hunger, enraging its melee attacks, mainly affecting the tank. The dragon, on the other hand, rocks a necrotic outburst aura, dishing out nature damage to the whole party during combat. Watch out for their Blight Spew move as well, where they toss a green swirly on the ground, dealing nature damage and stunning anyone caught in it. The third boss in this dungeon is the Blight of Galakrond, and this throws a 3-phase challenge your way, with the boss switching things up at 80 and 50%. In the first phase, the boss starts as a massive blob, dropping blight pools wherever it moves. Try to keep it still to avoid turning the room into a mess. Watch out for corrosive expulsion, green swirlies on the floor dealing damage and stunning players. Throughout the fight, the boss will also cast Corrosive Infusion on a player, applying a corrosion debuff, dealing damage on impact, and ticking until removed. Abilities like Feign Death can cancel it, so check out what your class might have. When corrosion expires on a player, that player will become mind controlled for 20 seconds with Corrupted Mind. The trick here is to pass it on through physical contact, usually to the tank. I say usually because you'll see later why not always. Ensure the receiver has enough health and keep an eye on timers. In phase 1, instantly pass it to the tank after Corrosive Infusion, as Blight Reclamation follows. This is a frontal cone that pulls players into the boss, removing the corrosion debuff, so tanks point it away from the group. In phase 2, however, the Blight Reclamation cast is quite late, so the player who has the debuff should stay near the tank and only pass it after the second set of Necrotic Winds start. More on Necrotic Winds later. If you pass it to the tank too early, it will expire on them before the frontal, thus mind-controlling them. So remember, after the second set of winds. In phase 3, Blight Reclamation comes really late into the fight, so pass it to the tank for most ticks, take it off for a few, then pass it back until Blight Reclamation is available again so the tank can clear off his debuff. At 80%, the boss will turn into Anzon, a dragon that spawns right here. As mentioned before, you will still need to deal with the corrosion debuff, but only pass it after the second set of Necrotic Winds. The Necrotic Winds will deal nature damage and push players away from the boss, while also spawning tornadoes radiating outwards, dealing even more damage and pushing back the players who get hit by them. Some groups even choose to use Bloodlust here if healing is a challenge. At 50%, the boss will enter phase 3, splitting into 2 dragons spawning in these 2 locations. right here. I'm not gonna try saying their names as I physically can't, so they will be nicknamed Laws and Daz. The best thing about these dragons is that whatever damage you do to one of them will be duplicated on the second. And Laws is the only one who melees and moves around, so taunt and tank him next to Daz as much as possible for cleave purposes. They also share health, so you don't have to care too much about what you are nuking. This is also where most groups use Bloodlust, if they didn't in the second phase. A new ability for this phase is Necrofrost, which gets cast on a random player, and it reduces their haste and roots them until it is destroyed. Nuke it down if you don't have the ability to clear it, but root removal abilities will be your best friend here. Tiger's Lust, Disengage, Freedom, Shapeshifting, you name it. Daz will often cast Noxious Ejection, dealing nature damage to the target, but he will also sometimes run behind a player and cast Incinerating Blight Breath, spewing a frontal cone of fire damage. This is particularly dangerous when combined with Necrofrost. The trash after this boss is just like the one at the beginning of the dungeon, but with an extra mob called Iridikron's Creation. Watch out for their stone bolts and interrupt them. They deal nature damage and put a bleed debuff on you for 12 seconds. Healers stay alert, and after pulling the last pack, make sure to move closer to the boss to trigger the roleplay for the final showdown. Chromie will be joining you in fighting Iridikron, the last encounter of this dungeon, so healers make sure to keep her health topped up. If Chromie goes down, Iridikron wins. Soon after the pull, a player will be targeted with an Extinction Blast, placing a large circle around them, which will deal loads of damage to anyone in the circle, and place a debuff on them. Chromie provides help by dropping a Timeless Protection Shield, reducing damage by 97%, but also granting her the Exhausted debuff upon expiration, making her vulnerable to damage. The targeted player should enter the shield and pop a defensive cooldown of their own as well. This ability will also do a lot of damage to Chromie, so healers, you will need to spot heal the target of the attack, but also Chromie when you have a bit of time. She will take increased healing, so you can patch her up quite quickly. Following the blast, the boss will cast a Stonecracker Barrage at Chromie, creating two circles. The smaller one in front should be soaked by the tank, and the bigger one on Chromie should be soaked by the other 4 party members. This will hit 3 times and also push back the tank, so make sure you go back into your soak if you get pushed out. This is another very good place to use defensives, especially if the blast was previously on you as well. After this, Chromie boosts everyone with Timeline Acceleration, granting a hefty haste buff for 25 seconds. The boss starts with no energy, building it up during the fight, except during Earth Surge. In this phase, he shields himself, pulsating, rending earth spikes until the shield is broken. The spikes will deal damage and knock players up, so don't get hit. This is a good time to be far away from the boss for easier dodging. It's also a pretty good time for small DPS cooldowns, as the shield should be brought down as soon as possible. Pulverizing Exhalation is a frontal cone to move out of, placing circles on 2 players spawning Pulverizing Creations. Move in the same direction to dodge the frontal, avoid stacking the circles, tank, interrupt and kill the adds, then resume the fight. The final move, Cataclysmic Obliteration, kicks in at around 90% health at 100 energy. The boss loses energy when taking damage, crucial to cancel the cast. Chromie steps in with her Timelight Transcendence bubble, boosting damage, cooldown rate, and resource regeneration by 100%. Step into the bubble, unleash DPS, and don't forget those healing cooldowns. And there you have it. That wraps up the complete Dawn of the Infinite's Galakrond's Fall Dungeon Guide. I hope you found these tips and strategies helpful in tackling the challenges within. But hey, I know the gaming community is full of ingenious players with their own very full bags of tricks. So, don't be shy, share your favorite tactics, clever skips, or any cool tricks you've discovered down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences and learn more from them. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so stay updated on all my gaming content. Until next time, may your loot be amazing and your dungeon runs flawless.